Hello, good evening. Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Burman. This is a special edition of The Hill on NewsNation. We expected this to be one of the defining images, right? At least at this point in time. President Trump, Vladimir Putin, face to face. That's coming mere moments into this historic summit that is now like 2.5 hours or so ongoing. But we didn't anticipate this. The Russian leader invited into the Beast, the presidential limo, and taking a one-on-one ride with the commander-in-chief. Putin smiling. And half a world away, that man right there, Vladimir Zelensky, waiting. His country's future at stake after 3 years of fending off Russian attacks, forces, and drones. We'll tell you what he is saying this evening. And leading into the summit, we heard from President Trump, touting the American economy, saying Putin wants a piece of it, but warning serious consequences if he senses the ex-KGB agent dragging him along.
It will be very severe. I'm not doing this for my health, okay? I don't need it. I'd like to focus on our country, but I'm doing this to save a lot of lives.
Once again, thanks for being with us tonight. Our coverage continues here on NewsNation as it is 6 o'clock here in Washington, 2 o'clock out west in Anchorage, Alaska tonight. And I want to show you some of what has already unfolding if you're just trying to catch up at this hour. The Russian leader touching down on U.S. soil. Trump, Putin shaking hands, and then, as you can see here, walking down literally a red carpet. Not just any, though, as it was lined on the sides. You'll see this once these two come into frame here. Lined by military jets, fighter jets. And as that happened, a B-2 bomber with its own escort, this right here, flying right over Putin's head as he walked down that red carpet with Trump. How about that for some symbolism? The two then stepping onto a small stage, posing for the cameras. Questions lobbed by reporters, but no answers. And then the two entered into what's known simply as the Beast, the presidential limo as we know it. Trump has only extended that to two other leaders, both times in his first term. Putin, as he walked in here, the president on one side, the Russian leader goes around on the other. Putin then seen smiling, perhaps knowing the symbolism that this image right here conveys across the globe. Now, one of the first men to meet the president on the ground, the governor of Alaska, home site of this historic summit. With me in a moment, Robert Sherman, live in Ukraine this evening, on whether or not we could see Vladimir Zelensky soon heading east. But first, inside one of the rooms where the two men will soon be standing side by side, are Kelly Meyer, live tonight in Anchorage, Alaska. And Kelly, this meeting, the three on the U.S. side, the three on the Russian side, their two interpreters, going on now for somewhere in the area of like 2.5 hours, right?
Yeah, and still going, Blake. And we don't know exactly when or if this joint press conference that you see set up behind me will happen. You know, we didn't know if it would be within the first few minutes. As President Trump said, he would know within the first 2 to 5 minutes whether or not it was going to be a good meeting. He said he could even walk out, and that would be that. But now it's been going on for, as you said, about 2.5 hours and still ongoing. What's interesting is they had that switch last minute, going from a one-on-one with interpreters to the three-on-three. So that one-on-one moment that you pointed out in the Beast was really the only time those two had just themselves in the Beast on the way to the location. Now they are inside that three-on-three meeting, and followed by that, they are going to then have the 5-on-5. You see there, this is the team of three on each side. Lavrov in there with him, as well as his top foreign policy advisor. Interesting, Lavrov was spotted wearing a USSR sweatshirt when he landed here last night. Those five that will be in the meeting after this, that includes the Treasury Secretary and the Commerce Secretary, which is interesting as you were talking about sanctions. We're talking about maybe the potential of Alaska access to the rare earth and minerals they were talking about. So that will be interesting, too. So it could be a while, Blake. We're here waiting to see what happens. I wanted to play a bit of what he had to say on the plane, though, about the negotiations as well as what this means for Ukraine. Take a listen to this.
There's nothing set in stone. I want certain things. I want to see a ceasefire. This is not to do with Europe. Europe's not telling me what to do. But they're going to be involved in the process, obviously, as will Zelensky. But I want to see a ceasefire rapidly. I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today.
Expectation that this was
And though Ukraine and its leader are not here for this meeting today, the president has floated the potential for a second meeting here in Alaska. But we do see protests happening outside of this base now. And there was even Ukrainian flags flying in the city of Anchorage today, Blake.
Our Kelly Meyer live tonight on site in Anchorage in the middle of it all. Kelly, thank you. The Ukrainian leader, as she mentioned, they're not present, but supporters for the country showing up, pro-Ukrainian protesters. Kelly just mentioning this. Here's some of the images in Anchorage today. And inside Ukraine, shots fired from both Russian and Ukraine ahead of this meeting. The Ukrainian drone strikes and a Russian offensive in the critical Donbass region. Air sirens also over the skies of Ukraine throughout the day, which is once again where we find our Robert Sherman live this evening. Robert?
Yeah, Blake, all throughout the day here, as there's all these conversations taking place in Alaska about peace, about ceasefires, about moving towards diplomacy. Well, here on the ground today, there's still heavy fighting that's ongoing in the Donbass region. We've heard air raid sirens here in Kyiv multiple times throughout the day. And even after the doors were shut and that 3-on-3 summit started to get underway, there were alerts going off here in Ukraine for both missile and drone incursions across the country here. That's why Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is saying tonight in his evening address, he doesn't buy that Russia is even serious about peace. Take a listen to the Ukrainian president.
The war continues. It continues precisely because there is no order, nor any indication that Moscow is preparing to end this war. On the day of negotiations, they also kill people, and that says a lot.
And when we met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky earlier this week, one of the things he said to be on the lookout for was a photo with Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Trump. He believed it'd be the most significant thing that comes out of this summit. That photo has already been snapped, and according to the Ukrainian president, it marks the end of Russian isolation, which began in 2022 when this invasion first took place. Bottom line, Blake, Ukrainians feel left out of the loop here. Low optimism anything will come out of this, but are hoping maybe a trilateral summit is in the future. Blake?
Maybe, as they say, we'll see what happens. Robert Sherman live tonight in Ukraine for us. Robert, thank you. When President Trump first arrived in Alaska a few hours ago for this historic summit, before he met President Putin, he was greeted by our next guest. Mike Dunleavy is the governor there in the great state of Alaska. Busy day for you, sir. I know it is, and I greatly appreciate you joining us live tonight here on the Hill. Thanks for being with us, Governor. You met with the president. Happened when he landed on the tarmac there. What'd you tell him?
Well, we were able to go into Air Force One, go into the Oval Office. We met with several of the secretaries, Chief of Staff, Susie Weil was there as well. And then the president came in, and the delegation from Alaska had a brief discussion with them about some of the rumors we were hearing in the press that the Russians were going to be invited to partake in our rare earths, or that the Russians were going to be transporting our gas by Russian LNG tankers. And those rumors were dispelled by the folks in Air Force One. And then basically we talked a little bit about our gas line, and then wished the president well because they were getting close to having President Putin land. And so, again, it was just clarifying some of the rumors we heard in the press, wishing them well, welcoming to Alaska, and then we went out on the tarmac, waited for both of the presidents to come to a podium. They took some pictures, and they went directly into the discussions that they're having now. So
obviously the focus here is on Russia and Ukraine, Alaska playing host to this meeting right now. But there's obviously, and you just went right to it, a lot at stake for your state, considering Russia is not that far off the coast there. What if anything's at stake here for your home state?
Well, we, like I said, we dispelled those rumors when we heard them because, of course, they were concerning. But we have a tremendous opportunity with all of our resources. I mean, our gas, our oil, our rare earths, our critical minerals. We have a lot of allies in the Pacific Rim that are obviously pro-American, pro-Alaskan. We've been having discussions with them on purchasing our gas. Our huge natural gas line project is moving, getting closer to a final investment decision, which should happen sometime in early January. So we're feeling pretty good about where the economy is going to go, where Alaska is going. We, very robust military, so we really don't fear the Russians. We've had to deal with the Russians since we became a state in 1959 at the height of the Cold War. So it's a dangerous neighborhood, but we know how to deal with these people.
How did you learn, Governor, that your state was going to be playing host to this? And have you dealt with the Russians at all? And if so, what's that like?
Well, you know, we're only 2.5 miles away from Russia. 2 islands, Big Diomede, Little Diomede, and 50 miles from coast to coast. And so we have a lot of Russian aircraft come close to our international fly zone here in Alaska as well. And our fighters escort them out. We have also Chinese warships that come up to the Bering Straits and have joint operations with the Russians. And we're also under a North Korean missile umbrella as well. So we've been dealing with the Russians since the Cold War. We actually, you know, when we were allies, we actually would be shipping aircraft through Alaska, through Siberia to help the Russians with the war effort against the Nazis. And so long-standing, I guess you would say, relations, oftentimes strained, initially good when Alaska was purchased, but I'd say they're strained now, and you know, we're keeping an eye on things.
He is the governor there in Alaska. It's a busy day, busy night. As I mentioned, I really appreciate you joining, sir. Mike Dunleavy, governor there out west. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Blake.
Of course. Joining me now, host of the Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, Chris Steyerwalt. Hello, brother.
How are you?
Doing well.
Happy Summit Friday.
Yes, sir. So much symbolism.
Yeah.
I mean, just if you take the first 5 minutes of this, we have no idea what's being said behind closed doors. Maybe we never will. Maybe we will. Who knows? I don't know. But you saw Trump and Putin shake hands.
Right.
Walk down a red carpet with fighter jets escorting them.
Right.
As that happens, a B-2 bomber buzzes over Putin's head. Trump then stands on a stage with him and brings him into the beast.
Right.
And I'm going, what's going on here with all this messaging?
Well, it looked like Trump was treating him, and he's small in stature compared to Trump, which Trump always enjoys whenever he can lord himself over another mammal. But Trump was sort of displaying him like he was a fish, a halibut that he had pulled out of Prince William Sound, that he was saying I've got him and he's here. Now, I'm sure that for the Ukrainians, this is a sickening sight. Yeah. This butcher, this war criminal, the worst actor on the world stage of our generation, getting the smoochy hello buddy handshake and all of this stuff. But we should also remember, symbolism is important. But what could come out of this is potentially crippling sanctions for Russia, a punishment for Russia.
That was kind of
that doesn't matter.
That was kind of like the message from Trump on Air Force One touting the U.S. economy, and we hear him do that every day. That's not new, but basically saying if Russia wants a piece of this, you better deal. And I guess the other side of that is if you don't come to the table, then we rain all those sanctions on top of you. Let me ask you though, the team Rubio and Witkoff, the first summit in Helsinki, they were one-on-one. Yeah. There were a lot of questions, both sides of the aisle, about that being the decision. This time around, it's different.
Well, Trump is different, too. He was at a low point in his first term when he went, and he was under the cloud of the allegations, some real, some fake, about what Russia had done to interfere in the 2016 election. And that was the dominant motif of his first term. And I don't know how much a part that was of the bad performance he turned in there and how poorly that summit went for the United States. Democrats are shattered. Donald Trump is ascendant. He's rolling troops through the District of Columbia. He's having his way with everything. Trump is sort of on a high. I think that's probably as significant as anything in this, is that a greater degree of confidence and surety for Trump potentially produces a different result. The other potentially different result is, I don't know about Witkoff. Right. Nobody knows about Witkoff and how pliant he is. Rubio does have a reputation as a hawk that he would probably want to defend.
All right, interesting. Catch you later in the show. We're going to be rocking and rolling all night.
I feel it. Yep. Here it comes.
Chris Steyerwalt, thank you, sir. Still to come. Our special coverage of the Trump-Putin summit continues. Live look there, Anchorage, Alaska. Live on the other side of the break, the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee. What happens next after this meeting? And as the president tries to play deal-maker in chief, there's a host of other issues facing the country. Chris, just acknowledging this right here, redistricting in California. What is going on coast to coast from Alaska to D.C. and beyond? I'm Blake Burman. Busy day, busy night. Back in 4. All right, live look right now as we continue our coverage. Joint Base Elmendorf, Richardson, Anchorage, Alaska. President Trump, the Russian leader Vladimir Putin, meeting right now. It's been going on, if it's still going on, for about 3 hours' time. Of course, a hope for a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine is what the U.S. is working toward here. The president previously saying he would know very quickly if a deal could be reached or not. The president saying the territorial swaps could be discussed as well. But today he clarified Ukraine will be involved in any deal.
I've got to let Ukraine make that decision, and I think they'll make a proper decision. But I'm not here to negotiate for Ukraine. I'm here to get them at a table, and I think you have two sides.
Live look back at the podium there, and I'm showing you this shot because you can clearly see that you got two folks up there where the president would be standing. It looks like on the right side, one of the sides, either way, whatever. And they're talking. I don't know if they're giving instructions or what. Either way, it's a possible sign that maybe a press conference.
A couple last-minute checks, making sure
A couple last-minute checks. Okay, so either way, we're keeping our eyes there on Anchorage, as it seems like with the press sitting down there, we could be getting close to something big there. Come on in, Congressman Adam Smith. He is the ranking member on the House Armed Services Committee. With us once again here on the Hill. Congressman, I asked you the other day if you could come on back, and you did. I'm grateful that you have. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. I found it interesting that the president said today, I'm not here to negotiate for Ukraine. I'm here to get them to the table. What did you make of those comments, and are you on board with that approach?
Yeah, I think I am. I mean, I think it's a realistic approach. Look, I mean, what we want is we do want an end to the war. I mean, that's certainly important for Ukraine and Russia, but it's also important for the world. This has been a devastating war. So you want that, but you also want it done in such a way that doesn't set Putin up to be able to use aggression further in Ukraine or elsewhere. And that's why it's so important that we have a sovereign democratic Ukraine that's capable of defending itself when that war comes to an end. So those are the two goals. And I think that is an appropriate role that President Trump can play, is to help push forward that conversation. I just hope he also understands the role that the U.S. can play in making sure that the coalition supporting Ukraine remains strong, and that the U.S. uses its power to show Putin that he can't take Ukraine. He has to get to a negotiated settlement. This is the part we've talked about before that I think President Trump has undermined that unity in the past. He's changing his tone a little bit. But if he does that, then I think that moves us forward towards a more positive trajectory.
I spoke to, you and I talked earlier in the week, and I spoke yesterday to someone who you certainly know of if you haven't spoken with in the past, former Ambassador Bill Taylor, who was the ambassador there in Ukraine. And he said this, it stood out to me, and I want to get your reaction on the other side.
Sure.
President Trump has a real advantage going into these conversations. He's got cards, as he says. He has the ability to put pressure on President Putin to come to the table for a ceasefire.
It kind of struck me in my interview yesterday with him, Congressman, how bullish he was on the prospects of something good coming out of this. What about that concept of the president holding the cards here?
Well, he does, but you can have the cards, but you also have to play them correctly. And yes, we are in position to put pressure on Russia in a variety of different ways. Sanctions is certainly an option the president has talked about. But again, strong support for Ukraine is another way to do that. The president thus far has not played those cards well. If he does play them, if he applies that pressure that Ambassador Taylor alluded to, that's the crucial step that needs to happen here. And, you know, they've been talking, I guess, for the last 2-3 hours now. We will learn slowly what came out of that conversation. But I agree with Ambassador Taylor of how President Trump should have approached this conversation, put pressure on Putin.
Our Kelly Meyer, who's in the room, texting me a minute ago, we're in our seats. So it appears as if we could be potentially getting close. Obviously, we live look there in Anchorage. Congressman, real quick, let me leave you with this. When you do hear from Trump and Putin side by side, you want to hear what?
Well, I want to. Well, first of all, I'm worried about the side by side because this is this simply empowering Putin, putting him on an equal stage. What I want to hear is I want to hear from President Trump what we are going to do to play those cards, put pressure on Putin to force him to end the war. Look, Ukraine would happily stop the war tomorrow. They were the ones that attacked and invaded. Putin is the one who can stop the war, and I want to hear from President Trump. That's his focus.
Adam Smith is the ranking member on the House Armed Services Committee with us once again here on the Hill. Congressman, thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Of course. So live look there in Anchorage, Alaska tonight. As Kelly just texted me, as I just shared with you, the media there in their seats. Does that mean we are close to a press conference? I've covered Donald Trump long enough to report to you tonight. We'll see what happens. We're going to take a quick break here. We are back on the other side of the break. Stay with us. Welcome back on this Friday evening. Our coverage continues here on NewsNation Live Look. Anchorage, Alaska. It is 6:30 here in Washington, D.C., and it is 2:30 in the afternoon there in Anchorage, and it appears as if, with the media seated, the podiums ready, the lights on, and the cameras pointed, that we could be getting close here to a possible press conference between the President of the United States and the leader of Russia. The meeting between the two starting a few hours ago. We don't know if it has fully wrapped at this point in time. It's one of the questions we are still trying to figure out and follow at this moment. I'm Blake Burman. I thank you for being with us tonight here on the Hill, joined for the next 30 minutes or so alongside Jonay Wartell, a Democratic strategist, Ronna McDaniel, former chair of the Republican National Committee, Chris Steigerwald, of course, host of the Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and Sabrina Siddiqui, national politics reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Hello to you all. Look at where we found ourselves on a summer Friday.
Right.
Hanging out here and awaiting Trump and Putin potentially here on the stage. Ronna, you said something interesting to me when I was like, I don't know what's happening. We'll see what's happening. You know Trump very well, obviously, and you said you wouldn't be surprised if he wants to go 6:30 on the dot or close to it.
I wouldn't be surprised. He's very aware of when news is airing here in the United States. You see this step and repeat that says pursuing peace. Mm-hmm. He wants to set the narrative as to what's going to happen today, and he's setting it with being in Alaska. He has control of it, and I think he would want to be in that nightly news coverage.
There are so many messages, Jonay, as Ronna hit on. One of them behind there is pursuing peace. It's almost a statement there, but I guess maybe there should be a question mark added to it as well.
A question mark indeed. I think what's important here is to see that Donald Trump is really creating this narrative that, I'm advancing the conversation to get to this ceasefire. Now, whether that materializes or whether we actually see great strides toward that, I think remains to be seen. But he wants to show that he has these diplomacy skills, that he can be a commander-in-chief, that he can have these tough conversations with dictators like Putin, and it makes him look strong. And I think it makes his base, at least for that moment, say, look at our commander-in-chiefs, he's looking strong on the world stage.
You've covered this president a long time, just like I have. What stands out to you tonight?
Well, what stands out is also who is not present for this meeting, and that is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. I know that when I've talked to people who are in tune with what the Ukrainians are thinking and what Europe, allies in Europe are thinking, there's a lot of concern over the fact that this conversation may include talks around Ukraine's future without Ukraine actually present at the table. Now, I think, what you heard from President Trump and his advisors going into the meeting, though, was tempering expectations a little bit, seeing this as one step toward possibly a trilateral meeting that would also include President Zelensky. But, the key is, can they get President Putin to agree to a ceasefire, which is Ukraine's, non-starting position in order to come to the table and sit down with Putin in the first place?
The Putin, when he comes out, has his own domestic political needs that he will have to meet.
Yeah.
I likened him earlier to, I believe, a halibut that Trump had fished out of Prince William Sound.
Yeah.
And he can't be a trophy for his domestic political consumption. So when he comes out, he's going to have to be tough, and he can't come out and give Trump what Trump wants, which is to say, we're in love again. It's great, reunited, and it feels so good. Here we are. He's going to have to look and sound tough. One other thing that changes, we talked previously about how it's a different Trump at a different time than it was when he had that misstep in Helsinki, is the Republican Party has grown increasingly supportive of Ukraine in the past 6 months. So when Donald Trump took office, numbers for Ukraine among Russians, the pits, Ukraine, no, Russia maybe is cool, we don't know. But it was polarized and politicized. In the past 6 months, GOP support for Ukraine has gone up 15 points. Their opposition to Putin. Vladimir Putin is back where he belongs with both parties, which is in the toilet with Republicans. And that gives Trump more maneuverability too.
So, no, go on, sorry.
I will say that, I traveled to Ukraine with President Biden in 2022 for that unprecedented wartime visit to Kyiv. And that shift is striking because part of the point of President Biden's visit at the time was to try and reaffirm U.S. support for Ukraine at a time when public perception around the war and U.S. support for Kyiv was shifting, in part because of the politics, because support for arming Ukraine had fallen among Republicans. So the fact that you've seen an increase in support within the GOP for Ukraine does give President Trump some more leverage. But there are some other key questions here, and I know that the Ukrainians are also very concerned about what kind of security guarantees President Trump and his administration will provide for Ukraine as part of any negotiations. That's still also a big question mark.
You know, it was interesting, Rana, to Chris's point and Sabrina's point, the president, when he was aboard Air Force One this morning, said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, I'm not doing this for my health. I'm doing this to try to save lives. And, instead, it could be focusing on my country, but I'm doing this to try to save lives. To their point, when the president comes out at some point in time here, and maybe we get some sort of a debrief, a download, questions and answers, what do you expect the messaging from him to be after this?
Well, I think he started it on Air Force One today also when he said we can't do anything without Ukraine and the European Union being at the table, which I think he needed to say before this meeting so there's not this expectation that he's brokering a deal without them at the table. But I do think he's going to come out and be tough. He's been much tougher on Putin than anybody expected.
Define tough.
I think he's going to say we want a ceasefire. We want Russia to act, and we're going to hold you accountable, and there could be consequences. And he said that on the plane today. He's been saying that his rhetoric has been much tougher than people expected as he's come into this presidency. And he's tired. He doesn't want to be played by Putin. He doesn't want that.
How much of it do you think also gets to, he said he would solve this on day one. He obviously didn't. He said that was in jest, but here we are in month 7 or 8, whatever it is, and this is the scene.
Yeah, I think he wants them to get it done. This is part of his promises. He's getting impatient. But he also is saying, I don't know if this guy's, just dragging it along. Is he saying things to keep us strung along? Is he actually trying for peace? And I think you're going to see that come out tonight. He's going to be tough.
I don't think Vladimir Putin is really serious about peace. And I think that to the degree he's willing to come to these conversations, I think he wants to look like someone on the world stage who's willing to negotiate and have a discussion. But I don't think he's really serious about advancing, getting to this ceasefire. And I think that President Trump, as a leader of the free world, has to be the one to say, I can stand up to Vladimir Putin, right? They've had a long and storied history in which he's cozied up to him, he's had affection toward him, and now he needs to show I can be tough toward him when the time comes.
Want to bring in Congressman Kevin Kiley. He is a Republican from the state of California, joining us live here on the Hill tonight. Congressman, thanks for being with us. I know we wanted to get into a big issue in your state, which was redistricting, but we obviously see the stage that is set right now. And so let's start there. I wonder from your perch tonight, as it appears that we're potentially around the corner here to the president and Vladimir Putin, what you're looking for, what you're watching.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's obviously a big moment for this particular conflict, for the world, for the values that we've really fought for in the entire post-World War II era. I said from the very earliest days of this conflict that Russia's actions could not stand, and I've been part of bipartisan efforts to support Ukraine up until the present day. And the reason for that was to provide the leverage that was needed precisely for a moment like this. So we don't know what the talks have consisted of so far today, but given the toll that this conflict continues to take, given the lives that continue to be lost on a staggering scale, we can only hope that there's a breakthrough for peace that this leads to.
Where is your party right now? I'm sure you heard what Chris laid out in some of the conversation. We obviously saw the Oval Office with Vladimir Zelensky earlier this year, a much different scene than the red carpet today in Alaska. Where's your party right now?
Well, believe it or not, our party's not a monolith. People have very different opinions on these and other matters, and people have felt very differently about this conflict and what role the United States ought to play. I think that by and large, if there's one unifying thread that I think is a unifying thread across parties, is that we want to see peace here. We want to see this conflict brought to an end. And I would add the important view of my own that I know is shared by many, that we need to make sure that it is done in a way that defends the values that have undergirded the international order since World War II, that we just can't go around invading countries. And so hopefully this conflict will soon be brought to an end, and that principle will be vindicated.
Do you take any issue with the president inviting in to the presidential limo the beast, Vladimir Putin? That's only happened. The president only did it twice, as we know of it, in his first term with Emmanuel Macron and Shinzo Abe. And you had that image today of Vladimir Putin in the beast. Does that rub you in the wrong way at all?
I didn't see that. I mean, the president has his own methods when it comes to conducting diplomacy, and I think that he's proven very successful in a number of ways in terms of ending conflicts and bringing peace. So not sure I'm going to second guess particular tactical decisions about who's in what vehicle, but hopefully the ultimate outcome here will be a good thing for the world and certainly for the folks who continue to put their lives at risk in this conflict.
One of the things that overhangs this, and it would potentially start in the United States Senate, are sanctions. That if members of Congress feel that Vladimir Putin is not acting in a manner or progressing in a manner that he should, that a massive sanctions package could be headed Russia's way. If it's an if, but if we get to that point, where do you think that would land, or how would that be received in the House?
Well, I don't know that we need to engage in hypotheticals at the very moment in which, there may be a very drastic change of course, or at least an opportunity for that. But I think that, certainly you can't take options off the table. And I think there's, going to be strong support if we don't see the sort of breakthrough we're looking for here for any measures that would, help to facilitate a positive outcome.
Kevin Kiley is a Republican from California. Congressman, I appreciate you joining us tonight here on the Hill, hanging with us for this breaking news. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
All right, back with me now. Full panel, as it is 6:42 here on the East Coast. And as we await whatever might come next out there in Anchorage, Alaska. Chris, you and I talked about this, and I actually think that's a striking image there on the bottom of the screen. We talked for a moment here about sort of what to expect and some shifts within the Republican Party. But what about the way that this was all set up today? You had, if you're just joining us here, it was striking. It was fascinating on so many levels because you had Trump and Putin arriving at the same time, walking down a red carpet. Vladimir Putin sort of walked through United States military fighter jets. A B-2 bomber then flying over his head.
Trump loves a flyover. He loves a flyover.
And then
it's like an NFL
walked
game.
onto the stage and then into the beast.
Yeah, as you watch that happen, you could think about how much different the world looked 5 months ago, 6 months ago. Trump was going to end the Ukraine war in 24 hours and and I don't know how long ago that meeting in the Oval Office was with Zelensky, but what a catastrophe, right? And it's everything is spiraling out of control, and he's going to feed Ukraine to the wolves. This is contemporaneous to something going on in the Republican Party that was super crazy. Remember, we have Russian grocery stores are amazing, and maybe Vladimir Putin is our friend, and maybe this is all awesome. So there was a moment in the spring where if you're Putin, you're like, I got it. I broke America, right? America's broken. The Republican Party cannot confront me because for the very reason that anything that Joe Biden wanted, as Sabrina pointed out, Joe Biden goes to Ukraine to sell the Ukraine war and, of course, convinced every Republican. And Joe Biden could have gone and said, I've discovered unicorns that will solve all of our problems for all time. And Republicans would be like, that guy and his dumb unicorns. I hate that guy. It's the worst. So it had the reverse effect. So there was a moment this spring where if you're Vladimir Putin, you say, I got him. We did it. And now here you are, again, you're being held up like a prized fish, and they've got bombers flying over your head. And Trump says he's going to end your economy if you don't stop attacking Ukraine.
Well, I do think that, as we know, the U.S. and allies in Europe have imposed sanctions on Russia, targeting their financial sector, targeting energy, targeting military technology. And what has changed is that President Trump at least has been talking tougher and not ruling out imposing additional sanctions on Russia if President Putin doesn't get more serious about a ceasefire. And what's striking to me, having covered the first Trump administration, that yes, that was prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but when Congress had a veto-proof majority through which they imposed sanctions on Russia for its interference in the 2016 election, it was like pulling teeth for people within the White House to get President Trump to sign that legislation and enforce those sanctions. And of course, there was the infamous Helsinki summit as well. So you have seen this shift in President Trump's posture. The big question is, what comes of all of this, right? And so I think, as I said, key question marks. Does Russia agree to a ceasefire? What security guarantees is the U.S. going to provide to Ukraine? And what about this question of land swapping? Because President Zelensky is very concerned that the Trump administration might be more open to giving up some Ukrainian territory in exchange for a deal.
I spoke to former Ambassador William Taylor yesterday, Janae, who told me, in his view, he was the ambassador to Ukraine, in his view, that Trump has all the cards. Or not all the cards. He said Trump has the cards. Are you there?
Well, I think that he does have a little bit of wind at his back in this moment because he's talking tougher, as it was mentioned, than he has in the past. And so he's really looking like, I'm going to flex my diplomatic muscle here and talk a little tougher. These sanctions feel perhaps a bit more real given the context that we're in. So I do think that while he may not have all of the cards in his hand, he may have a few more than he's had in the past, right? And so I think it remains to be seen how he plays them. It remains to be seen how much this really does affect Vladimir Putin's disposition here, because I don't think that Vladimir Putin is really truly serious about peace. I don't think he's serious about reaching the ceasefire. So the degree to which these sanctions might move him even a smidge will be interesting to see.
I mean, I don't think Trump is. I think Trump's talking tough and he means it. I really do. I don't think he's going to shy away from this. He's making some red lines for himself, and he's saying if this doesn't happen, there are going to be sanctions. And I think he expects Putin to come his way. I really do.
To that point, I saw the B-2 bomber fly over.
Yeah.
Like, that is significant because that was the thing that went into Iran.
Well, and I think Chris is right. The staging, Trump is taller. They come down on the red carpet. It's in the U.S. You look at the staging here, this pursuing peace. I just think a lot of this is orchestrated. The one question I have about him coming into the Beast is, I think initially they were supposed to have a one-on-one meeting, and then it changed to 3-on-3. So maybe that was, hey, I'll bring you and have this private moment in the Beast.
They could set that up any which way.
They could.
And that's an image that's like, when I saw that, I was like, whoa, what's going on here?
But I'm glad he had Secretary Rubio and Witkoff in that meeting, that it was 3-on-3 as they're having these discussions. I think that was important.
Want to go out to Ukraine real quick. Our Robert Sherman is live in Kyiv tonight watching all of this with us. Robert, you've been in Ukraine now for quite some time, more than a week. Obviously, when we see Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin side by side, which we have already, but speaking publicly side by side, among the many questions for the Ukrainians is, when might Vladimir Zelensky get his turn? And could it be all three of them? I know you spoke with Zelensky earlier this week, and I wonder what indications you might have of that potentially happening?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, Blake, that's the victory that Ukrainians are looking for in all these talks. They don't really like the way that any of this is going down here tonight. They don't like the fact that they don't have a seat at the table. They don't like the fact that Russia's term in isolation is coming to an end. The one positive takeaway would be an invitation for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to a trilateral format, because the Ukrainians have wanted this for some time. And even as of just a few days ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin said he wasn't ready to meet with the Ukrainians yet. I would say is that there is a lot of low optimism here in Ukraine with all of these conversations taking place because the Ukrainians are not present here. And the Ukrainians are not very confident that Russia even wants peace. I mean, even after the doors were shut and that 3-on-3 meeting began, there were alerts going off here in Ukraine for drone attacks, for missile attacks. So Russia very much so keeping the pressure on the Ukrainians up until the moment that those doors were shut and President Putin and President Trump were having that diplomacy behind closed doors. That's why people here don't think Russia is serious, but they're waiting to be surprised if maybe there's a change on the horizon. Blake?
Our Robert Sherman live in Kyiv tonight. Over to our Kelly Meyer live in Anchorage. As Kelly, I'm told that the Russian delegation is seated there. Hello, Kelly. What can you tell us about what we could be expecting here?
Hey. Yeah, so we are seated here now, Blake. I got to tell you, when we left you from the last time we talked, they quickly called us to our seats here very rapidly, and we didn't know exactly what was going on. We didn't know if the meeting had ended, how it went. Now, as you said, we're hearing for the Russian delegation it ended. We're also hearing that Steve Witkoff has left quickly. It's about to come out. Okay, so now we're getting an update that he's about to come out. So we'll talk to you here until we see them, Blake. But Witkoff was just out here and then quickly went back behind the curtain. We know his team is seated from up in the front, Caroline Levitt, Stephen Chung, and we're just watching now to see when they come out here. But it really could be any moment that we could see President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin along with him and find out exactly how this went. Watching now as the curtain opens, Lavrov is coming out right now, Blake. As you see, his foreign minister coming out. He's the one that we were just talking about that was wearing that sweatshirt when he landed that said USSR. He's taking his seats now. Obviously, a lot of movement, a lot of people trying to get him. And other members walking back in from, all right, I see Susie Wiles walking back into her seat. We also see some of the U.S. delegation. I see Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent coming out right now, taking their seats. Here comes Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, CIA Director John Radcliffe, Stephen Chung, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, all coming out. Caroline Levitt after them, all taking their seats. I see Dan Scavino, all taking their seats. So we are getting ready for President Donald Trump to come here on stage to find out exactly how this meeting went.
Kelly Meyer, live for us there in Anchorage. Kelly, thank you very much. I'll clear you because I know you probably, as we see Kelly smiling there, have to take a seat there because the president's coming out anytime. I can tell you what you just witnessed from Kelly is the toughest thing to do in all of cable news. A world event there near the front row with the American leadership and a foreign leadership there. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Kelly doing it with grace. Kelly, thank you. It appears that we are moments away. Normally, when you have the high-level folks seated like that, you know that you're around the corner. I thank you for being with us tonight. It is 6:52 here in Washington, 4:52 out in Anchorage, Alaska. I'm Blake Burman as our coverage continues here on NewsNation. Chris Steyerwald, it appears as if the two leaders could be coming out any moment here.
Yeah, Putin needs more. Time is on Putin's side. A draw is good for Putin. His army is being devastated, but they continue to get enough conscripts. They continue to get enough bodies to to feed into this meat grinder that our allies in Ukraine have built for them. He is on sure enough footing at home, and as long as the Indians and others keep buying Russian oil, he can keep this going. So time is on his side in terms of his territorial ambition. The threat that Donald Trump has, which is more punishing economic sanctions, do mean economic pain for American consumers. Inflation is going up, prices are going up, prices are a huge pressure inside domestically.
The worry would be oil.
Exactly. If he double tariffs India for buying Russian oil and shuts off the spigot in Russia completely, that's going to drive U.S. energy prices up.
I'm not going to go where Chris is. I actually think I just did a focus group last night in Michigan, and people are feeling very good about Trump. They feel like costs are going down. They feel like he's doing the right thing. They like what he's doing on crime. They like what he's doing on immigration. And I just am going to say to the casual viewer tonight that isn't a foreign policy wonk, they're going to look at this and say, this is a leader. This is a president going in and leading.
And as you hear there, the announcement, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, and the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, side by side. Anchorage, Alaska. As we watch and listen live here on News Nation, I thank you for being with us tonight.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, our negotiations have been held in a constructive atmosphere of mutual respect. We had very thorough negotiations that were quite useful. I would like to thank once again my American counterpart for the proposal to travel out here to Alaska. It only makes sense that we've met here because our countries, though separated by the ocean, are close neighbors. So when we've met, when I came out of the plane and I've said, good afternoon, dear neighbor, very good to see you, in good health and to see you alive. I think that is very neighborly. And I think that's some kind words that we can say to each other. We're separated by the Strait of Bering, though there are 2 islands only between the Russian island and the U.S. island. They're only 4 kilometers apart. We're close neighbors, and it's a fact. It's also important that Alaska has to do with our common heritage, common history between Russia and the U.S., and many positive events have to do with that territory. Still, there is tremendous cultural heritage back from the Russian America. For example, Orthodox churches and a lot of more than 700 geographical names of Russian origin. During the Second World War, it was here in Alaska that was the origin of the legendary air bridge for the supply of military aircraft and other equipment under the Land-Lease program. It was a dangerous and treacherous route over the vast emptiness of ice. However, the pilots of both countries did everything to bring closer the victory. They risked their lives and they gave it all for the common victory. I was just in the city of Magadan in Russia, and there is a memorial there dedicated to the Russian and the U.S. pilots. And there are 2 flags, the U.S. flag and the Russian flag. And I know that here as well there is such a memorial. There is a military burial place several kilometers away from here. The Soviet pilots that buried there who died during that dangerous mission. We're thankful to the citizens and the government of the U.S. for carefully taking care of their memory. I think that's very worthy and noble. We'll always remember other historical examples when our countries defeated common enemies together in the spirit of battle camaraderie and allyship that supported each other and facilitated each other. I'm sure that this heritage will help us rebuild and foster mutually beneficial and equal ties at this new stage, even during the hardest conditions. It is known that there have been no summits between Russia and the U.S. for 4 years, and that's a long time. This time was very hard for bilateral relations, and let's be frank, they've fallen to the lowest point since the Cold War. I think that's not benefiting our countries and the world as a whole. It is apparent that Sooner or later, we had to amend the situation to move on from the confrontation to dialogue. And in this case, a personal meeting between the heads of state has been long overdue. Naturally, under the condition of serious and painstaking work, and this work has been done in general. Me and President Trump have very good direct contact. We've spoken multiple times. We spoke frankly on the phone. And special envoy of the president, Mr. Witkoff, traveled out to Russia several times. Our advisors and heads of foreign ministries kept in touch all the time. And you know fully well that one of the central issues was the situation around Ukraine. We see the strive of the administration and President Trump personally to help facilitate the resolution of the Ukrainian conflict. And his strive to get to the crux of the matter, to understand this history, is precious. As I've said, the situation in Ukraine has to do with fundamental threats to our security. Moreover, we've always considered the Ukrainian nation, and I've said it multiple times, a brotherly nation, however strange it may sound in these conditions. We have the same roots, and everything that's happening is a tragedy for us and terrible wound. Therefore, the country is sincerely interested in putting an end to it. At the same time, we're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots, the primary causes of that conflict. And we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole. And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we are prepared to work on that. I would like to hope that the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring closer that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kiev and European capitals will perceive that constructively and that they won't throw a wrench in the works. They will not make any attempts to use some backroom dealings to conduct provocations to torpedo the nascent progress. Incidentally, when the new administration came to power, bilateral trade started to grow. It's still very symbolic. Still, we have a growth of 20%. As I've said, we have a lot of dimensions for joint work. It is clear that the U.S. and Russian investment and business cooperation has tremendous potential. Russia and the U.S. can offer each other so much in trade, digital, high-tech, and in space exploration. We see that Arctic cooperation is also very possible. And our international context, for example, between the Far East of Russia and the West Coast of the U.S. Overall, it's very important for our countries to turn the page, to go back to cooperation. It is symbolic that not far away from here, at the border between Russia and the U.S., there is a so-called international date line. I think you can step over, literally, from yesterday into tomorrow. And I hope that we'll succeed in that. In political sphere. I would like to thank President Trump for our joint work, for the well-wishing and trustworthy tone of our conversation. It's important that both sides are result-oriented, and we see that the President of the U.S. has a very clear idea of what he would like to achieve. He sincerely cares about prosperity of his nation. Still, he understands that Russia has its own national interests. I expect that today's agreements will be the starting point, not only for the solution of the Ukrainian issue, but also will help us bring back business-like and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S. And in the end, I would like to add one more thing. I'd like to remind you that in 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague that the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it would come to hostilities. And I said it quite directly back then that it's a big mistake. Today, when President Trump is saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. I can confirm that. I think that overall, me and President Trump have built a very good, businesslike, and trustworthy contact. And I have every reason to believe that moving down this path, we can come, and the sooner the better, to the end of the conflict in Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. That was very profound. And I will say that I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Ratcliffe, thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here, and I think, you know, everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time, and we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with. We really made some great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. We had many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax. That made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all, but we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax, but what was done was very criminal. But it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things that we'd like to have dealt with. But we'll have a good chance when this is over. So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, whose faces, who I know in many cases, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss, but especially this one right over here. But we had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do. So, again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.